Good afternoon. It's Thursday afternoon, July the 16th. And it's been a while since I've addressed you on video, but there is something that I wanted to share with you, and I hope you will take time to listen to what I have to say this afternoon. It is what it is. That's an expression that has become all too common. We hear people say those words when they find themselves in a situation and they've resigned themselves to the fact that they don't really have any control over what is happening. They can't affect the change that they would like to. It's an expression I don't like very much. In fact, when I hear it, often what I'm thinking is, well, yeah, but it shouldn't be that way. Or what can I do to alter the situation so that the future can look more the way I would like it to. I don't like to resign myself to it is what it is. And yet, very often, it ends up that that is all we can do. We have much less control over many situations in our lives than we would like to think we do. And our experiences, I think, have taught us that. And the present situation we find ourselves in is very much one of those kinds of situations. When the pandemic first struck, we held out the naive hope, perhaps, that it would be short-lived, that it would only last a couple of months, a couple of weeks, maybe, and we'd be back to work and back to worshiping and all of the other things that were a regular part of our lives that added normalcy to our existence. And it has now been 4 months. And the cases of COVID-19 are continuing to rise in Georgia and really everywhere else in this country. And the relief we thought we were going to get with the summer months and the increased warm temperatures has not come. And so we wonder again, how long? How much longer will we have to endure this? COVID-19 has brought sickness, it's brought death, it has disrupted the patterns of life in just about every way imaginable at this point, and we're ready for it to be over. So I guess what I want to speak to you on today is patience. And this is a topic that I've addressed before. It's also something that I'm not very good at. I'm not a patient person by nature, and most of us aren't. And so I'm sure you're feeling like I am, that you're tired of the situation, tired of hearing the news that the number of cases is on the rise again, that we seem to be nowhere closer to that magic vaccination that we've been awaiting that's going to make living and moving about safer for all of us. How long must we wait? Now, biblically speaking, of course, there are many, many stories in which God's people have to, against their nature, wait on the Lord to act. One example I can think of is the time in which the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt. The Bible tells us that they were slaves in Egypt for 400 years, waiting on the Lord for deliverance, waiting on God to act. And when God does finally get around to acting, he calls Moses from a burning bush, and as he is speaking to Moses, he says, "I have heard my people's cries in bondage." Well, yeah, you've been hearing those cries of bondage for over 400 years. What took so long, Lord? And yet the thing that we very often have to resign ourselves to say it is what it is that God acts in God's own good time and not according to our time frame. That's the way it is time and time again. And even after God does act to deliver his people from slavery, they still wind up wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years before they're allowed to enter their promised land, waiting again on God to fulfill the promise. And in the meantime, we get cranky, we get frustrated, we cry out, we want to know when it's all going to end. And there's no answer for that question, unfortunately. The only comfort that comes biblically in these stories is that God does indeed finally provide a resolution. God provides a future for his people that is hopeful, that offers new beginnings, new possibilities, but it only comes in the Lord's own good time. And so in the meantime, I guess what I would like to offer you is something that I spoke about way back in March when I first started making these videos. I shared with you a talk on the Psalms, and specifically on the Lament Psalms. Now there are many, many Lament Psalms in the book of Psalms. These are Psalms in which the writer is offering a complaint to God about a situation that is unjust, and crying out to God for deliverance, sometimes raging at God because of the circumstances. And I would offer those Psalms to you once again. As you read through some of those, you may find that the language and the imagery used doesn't really relate to the way you're feeling about the present situation. But the good thing about the Lament Psalms, I believe, is that they demonstrate to us that the Jewish people felt perfectly free to register their complaints with God about what was going on. They understood that God was big enough to hear those complaints and not be offended and not react with outrage. We Christians very often approach this differently and feel that it is incorrect or inappropriate for us to complain or to protest against God. The Jews understood that it was something that God understood and found acceptable. And the other thing that the Lament Psalms offer us is a sense that we are not alone, that the path we are trotting on now has been covered before by people of faith across many generations. This is certainly not the first time that God's people have found themselves in the middle of a crisis, awaiting an outcome and feeling helpless. And after all, it has only been 4 months, which in the overall scheme of things is not a long period of time. We don't know how much longer it's going to continue, but we need to have faith, continue to walk the way that seems to have been put before us, and believe that God will provide an outcome. That the time is coming when we will be able to be gathered together as friends, as family, without as much fear about acquiring COVID-19 or some other virus or disease, that it will be safe again for us to get together and celebrate as a people. Those are my thoughts for you today. I hope they have been in some way helpful. And in the meantime, I pray that you will be safe, that you will ask the Lord and receive the patience that is needed in the present situation to await the Lord's resolution, because the Scriptures steadfastly bear witness that the Lord will provide one. But of course, it will come in God's own good time, not in ours. God bless you, and I hope to see you this Sunday as we worship.